Hey, welcome to another Rad story. I'm your host, Rad Universe. Today I'm going to be talking about Mr. Boogedy, Freddy Krueger, Nightmare on Elm Street, how all this stuff kind of connects in this weird way because we started with an ABC Sunday night movie, Disney production, and somehow got into New Line Cinema, Elm Street 4, but not totally all the way yet. It was edited for TV, didn't see the version in its entirety until much later, but it's about a kid who was really interested in horror and the allure of Freddy Krueger, but had protective parents who didn't want him to get involved with too much horrific nonsense too early. So I was able to get an introduction into the world of the macabre through an ABC Sunday night movie that was about a family that moved into a haunted house, and then how it eventually led me to seeing an edited version of A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4, my first Freddy Krueger movie I ever was allowed to see, edited for TV. I taped it, got very familiar with it, and then years later, when I got to see the uncut version, all the things I noticed. So I'm going to talk about how all this kind of fits together, and then had a real surprise when I was actually in college, and how Mr. Boogedy came back to me again. So this is a rad story. Mr. Boogedy meets Freddy Krueger. Alright, so, Mr. Boogedy. Mr. Boogedy was a movie produced by Disney for the Disney Sunday Night Movie in 1986. This film starred the kid from Married with Children, David Faustino, and some other familiar faces. I'm more familiar with their character names, so forgive me if I'm not going to get all the actors' names correct in this video here. But this is about the Davis family, okay? In the Davis family, we got Carlton Davis and we got Eloise Davis, the heads of the household. And they got 3 kids. The oldest is Jennifer, and then they have Corwin and Ari. Now, I remember when I was a kid, I used to think it was Ori. I always thought it was Ori, but it's actually Ari. Okay, great. So this is the family, and the dad, his job is he works for Gag City. And Gag City is a franchise of novelty gags that he sells in the store, and so he's got Joy Buzzers and all the, rubber chickens and Gag City, all right? And they move to a house in New England, the middle of New England, and it's a fixer-upper, and it's a pretty haunted house. And the whole time, there's this dynamic where Carlton thinks everything's a gag, because he works for Gag City. So, oh yeah, right, the house is haunted. Good one, guys. Oh, how did you do the dancing mummy bit? That was fantastic. It's a fun little thrill ride as these kids are exploring, and it's spooky. And here's the deal, is that we got this ghost who haunts this house. And he's Mr. Boogedy. And he has the name because he goes, boogedy, boogedy, boo! And he's got grilled cheese for a face, as Jennifer describes. And he goes back to the time of Salem witch trials and the New England, old school, Pilgrim. He has all that, and he was a nasty guy. And he prevented Maid Marian from being with her son Jonathan. And poor ghost of Jonathan was forever in this house and unable to see his mother. His mother tried to come in. Eloise was having a midnight snack, talked to the ghost, and then realized, hey, we gotta help these ghosts. So the family ultimately bonded together and had a face-off, a legendary face-off with Mr. Boogedy. And don't want to have any spoilers here, I mean, Mr. Boogedy had a good shot, the family had a good shot. Who won, the Davis family or Mr. Boogedy? I'm just gonna have to let you watch to find out. But oh man, this is just a great family film that really was able to introduce horror to really young minds like myself. I saw this for the first time when I was 4 years old, and growing up in the mid-'80s as a kid who's just discovering this world of movies and movies that aren't really necessarily appropriate for your young mind just yet. some more advanced concepts, some more horrific concepts. And it was impossible to be this young, impressionable mind in the mid-'80s without, like, being somewhat aware of this enormous character, Freddy Krueger. And A Nightmare on Elm Street was something that I've been interested in since way, way before anything else, because that was just part of the culture. But the thing was, is that, I had protective parents that didn't want me to see Nightmare on Elm Street when I'm 4. They want to protect me against certain types of things, certain horrific imagery, until maybe I'm a little bit older, you can understand a little bit better. But what's really brilliant about Mr. Boogedy is that, well, first of all, this Mr. Boogedy character, he had a grilled cheese face, just like Freddy Krueger. So it was like, oh, this is kind of like maybe a Freddy Krueger movie, like a Nightmare on Elm Street sort of thing. And all right, it's like ABC, Disney Sunday night movie. We're usually watching cartoons, Mickey Mouse, Donald Duck, like, that sort of thing. But now it's going to be this family movie about a family, the Davis family, that has a gag franchise, and they move into a haunted house. This is great scene at the opening where there's a sign that's like illuminated, like backlit LED or something. It's in red, and it's right in front of the house, and it says, "Not really haunted." Because, when you get a look at this house on the exterior, it looks like a haunted house. Like, let's make no mistake. But to make sure, especially since they were trying to sell this, it was a hard house to move on the market, but the Davis family, they jumped at it. Even though they were warned by Neil Witherspoon to go back, to leave, because it was about to get a little out of hand. But it's okay. He helped them turn the lights on at the beginning when they originally saw the skull, thinking it was a lamp, and they're getting freaked out. He then lights a match, turns the nose, and then the lights go on. But it's great because the music does a rise, like with it, and it goes into a music cue underneath him talking, and he's like, on behalf of Lucifer Falls, we want to tell you, get out. But it's cool because it's got the like the Lucifer Falls, like middle of New England music vibe happening already, and it's just like flickered on with the lights going on. But yeah, the Davis family, they did not listen to Neil Witherspoon. They stayed there and they did their Gag City franchise no matter what. And there's some great lines in this movie. There's this morning where they're all having breakfast around the table, and like the one kid's wearing like goofy gag glasses that make him look cross-eyed, something silly. And Jennifer, I think, is coming in. They're like, eat the eggs, because they're gag eggs. When you cut into them, it like squirts you in the eye, and they're all about just the silly, cheesy gags like that. Like when Carlton shakes Neil Witherspoon's hand for the first time, it's with the joy buzzer. So it took a long time to believe that Mr. Boogedy was a real ghost, and that like all these weird things going on were actually real, because they were more likely a gag up until the very end. And the battle with Mr. Boogedy at the end is just like epic. I'll never forget. I think it was the kid from Married with Children again. He went to go hit Mr. Boogedy with like a piece for a fireplace. What are those called? It wasn't like the poker, because it was like it was like whatchamacallit, like it was like a spatula. What are these things called for a fireplace? Like, so you could shovel like the ashes out or something like that. Just some fireplace swag that was lying around in their living room, and they're still unpacking. All right, so, and of course the family, all the boxes that they moved into their house with, bringing all their possessions over, were in Gag City boxes because of the dad's business. And so they're in this living room, and there's piles of Gag City boxes, and they end up being like a fortress that they're able to hide behind and have like a little defense wall going on, the battle against Mr. Boogedy. And the kid from Married with Children goes up and he tries to hit him with this fireplace swag, and before he's able to get him, Mr. Boogedy's like, boogedy boogedy boo, and like the the flat spatula part like starts like bubbling into a bubble, like it's metal. It's like it's this black metal, but it's like Mr. Boogedy did this spell where like a bubble started coming out of it, and then it's like inflating and helium, and he's rising, and this thing lifts him up where he's off the ground. His hands are stuck to it, and he's stuck. And Carlton and Eloise are trying to do their thing, and he goes boogity boogity boo, and they get frozen. Like there's this wind, and they're like stuck in the wind, and like no one's able to do everything except for Ari, the littlest kid. And this kid throughout the whole movie is like always like mirroring his older brother, repeat like, you know, like, oh, there's that sound, and he goes, yep, there's that sound, and like it's that dynamic throughout the whole thing. And so he's now like taken off, and no one else was able to save the family against Mr. Boogedy, and it came down to a vacuum cleaner. They had this really, I think it was a gag vacuum cleaner. Yes, it was a gag vacuum cleaner, but it was like big and red, and oh my gosh, it was like actually one of the scariest things I remember watching this as a kid, because there was this one camera angle that was from behind the how do I describe this? So it's just like Mr. Boogedy, once again, did boogity boogity boo, and he like possesses this vacuum cleaner. And it's like this big base, it's like red, it looks like some kind of dome, and there's like the black tube that comes out of it that would normally be, you know, just for, it wasn't like a, I don't know, it wasn't like a heavy duty vacuum cleaner. It was for, I guess, some light, you know, curtain dust or whatever, all right? So anyways, he possesses it, and it becomes like, you know, like a weapon or just like a creature that's trying to attack these kids, and it's like shooting ping pong balls out of it, or you know. But it was very terrifying to like see the nose nozzle of this vacuum cleaner kind of like attack like you, like, you know, with a camera angle from right behind there, and I was like creeped out. But ultimately he's able to take control of this vacuum cleaner and turn it on Mr. Boogedy, and then it shoots these ping pong balls at him, and it's like, at first not effective, but you know, he finds the will to survive, and Mr. Boogedy is he's taken care of. He gets sucked into the vacuum cleaner, because what happened was it's actually his cloak that got sucked into the vacuum cleaner, and this cloak is actually the subject of the whole film in and of itself. So it's like Mr. Boogedy back in the New England Pilgrim days, he basically sold his soul to the devil, and he got this cloak, this magic cloak that would make him invisible and give him unlimited powers. And that's how he was able to prevent this character, Maid Marian, from ever seeing her son, because he really loved her and she rejected him, and he's like, I'm not having that, so I'm gonna, you know. And so 200 years go by, and this poor kid, he's got a cold. He's been stuck in this house with a cold for 200 years, unable to get healthy again, because Mr. Boogedy basically froze him there. And so that's how the kids kind of start discovering there's something spooky, ghosts are going on in the house, because they're sneezing. They're hearing sneezing everywhere. And, you know, he ultimately is able to team up, and they reunite Jonathan with his mom, and Ari saves the day. And then very end of the movie, by the way, I realized I did spoil the movie. Earlier I said I wouldn't, but I did. Spoiler alert. Mr. Boogedy, yeah, they got him at the end, because they got his cloak. That was the deal. They sucked his cloak into the vacuum cleaner. So at the very, very end of the movie, there's a great kind of exit where they're like, all right, well, I guess we really got those ghosts, huh, Dad? Ari repeats. I guess we really got those ghosts, huh, Dad? Yeah, sons, you know, we did it. Like, you know, they're all bonding together, and then they're like, all right, like, there's no such things as real ghosts, right? You know, they walk away, and then all of a sudden this voice from the back goes, you want to bet? They turn around, and they're actually looking at their vacuum cleaner, because I believe, I'm telling the story wrong, but there's one last gag city gag. Like, the vacuum cleaner, like, had this, like, clown-like thing that pops out of it when you take the lid off, and it was never a real vacuum cleaner in the first place. It was once again, it was all a big joke, right? But yeah, this whole like, you want to bet? They didn't cut back to this clown that came out of the thing, and he winks at you. And it's interesting because he's also holding Mr. Boogedy's cloak, and because the vacuum cleaner sucked the cloak up, and that made him vanish, because without his cloak he was powerless, and Mr. Boogedy vanishes. That's how he disappears. But this wink and the possession of the cloak, I believe, are what sets it up for Bride of Boogedy, which is for another day, another story, the follow-up to Mr. Boogedy. But that's sort of the story of Mr. Boogedy, and Now we're going to go into the next segment. Let's keep this show rocking. All right, so the ABC Sunday Night Movie. This is a big part of my childhood, my early VHS tapes that I recorded, and films that I would watch over and over and over again because I had those tapes recording those original broadcasts. Now, generally, they were screening a lot of different cartoons. I taped Mickey Goes on Vacation. On Vacation is the name of that. I love that. Jiminy Cricket kind of hosts the wraparounds, and they each do these stories, one with like Pluto and Goofy, and one with Donald Duck, and they eventually all go together on this trip in this little popper tent thing they got connected to their car, and I love that. ABC Sunday Night Movie was something I look forward to, as I think a lot of people look forward to every Sunday night growing up for a source of entertainment. And I, like a lot of other people in my generation, again, I was born in 1982. I was 4 years old when Mr. Boogedy first came out on the ABC Sunday Night Movie. We recorded these, and a lot of the early content on my YouTube channel came from some of these tapes. I uploaded actually the Michael Eisner intro and wraparound segments for the Mr. Boogedy films that I had on there. Now, the interesting thing is my tapes, I believe my parents would do the method of pausing the VCR for the commercial breaks, and I don't think I got the commercial breaks. And I always remember that sort of chopped up style. Sometimes there was a little bit missing, or maybe we wouldn't get all the credits at the end or something like that because we were just kind of making a concise version. And I wish they didn't do that. I mean, I wish we had all the commercials still intact, because my favorite tapes have all the commercials still intact, but some of our Disney Sunday Night movies didn't have that. But I had the bumpers like going out, and that was actually like kind of the cool things. Like the movie would be on, and then they'd have the Disney music with the Tinkerbell flying over Epcot Center shot. The Disney Sunday Movie will return after these messages, and that was always like enough time to like, oh, get up, we're gonna hit the pause button on the VCR, great. And then it would come up again, that bumper, like, and now we return to the Disney Sunday Night Movie. And again, that was just enough time to get up and hit the pause button on the VCR, and there you go. So it's actually very easy to, for recording this stuff uninterrupted. And I think at that time, I mean, if I was going to record something now for my children, I'd probably bleep out some of the commercials too. But it's interesting how nostalgic I am for my commercials, and I'm like upset with my parents for doing that. I wouldn't want my children to be upset with me, in the future for doing that to them. I mean, whatever, let them decide. But yeah, I mean, like, do you want to subject your kids to lots of advertising or not? Like, do you want to end up having them throw a tantrum at the store to buy you something that because they saw the commercial 100 times during their favorite, cartoon show? Like, I mean, yeah, there's a fine line. But anyways, as the kid who wants all the stuff in the store that's advertised in the commercials, like it's fun to like have your commercials to like go back to. So anyways, our ABC Sunday Night Movie was kind of clean recorded, and but anyways, I just watched these movies over and over and over again, and I'm very fond of the way some of my films just like didn't get completed, or we started taping something else on the same tape right over it. So when Mr. Boogedy ends, I'm actually always accustomed to going straight into Dumbo, because Dumbo, I think, was another film that was done on the Disney Sunday Night Movie, and maybe it was the week after or soon after the Mr. Boogedy screening, because that was like the next thing we taped. And same thing, like we did that with the pause technique, so it's just Dumbo. But Dumbo's also missing a little bit of like the intro, because my parents, I guess, didn't hit the record button in time. And I'm missing like the credit sequence at the end of Mr. Boogedy, because it just goes straight into Dumbo. But I'm so accustomed to, like, as a kid, I'm going to pull out this tape, I'm going to watch Mr. Boogedy, and then it just goes into Dumbo. Then I end up watching Dumbo 2. And just like, those two always go together for me. And yeah, it was interesting when I eventually was able to get a uncut copy of Mr. Boogedy. I ordered a bootleg off of eBay in the mid 2000s. I have it right here actually. Like, this never officially came out. I mean, this is, like, some fan put this together. I mean, I would love it if this was a real Walt Disney Mr. Boogedy clamshell. But it's not. I have, you know, label machine Mr. Boogedy on the side. But whoever made this, like, did a nice job. I mean, they, like, made a label that looks like Mr. Boogedy, and they did this, you know. I don't know where the original copy of the film kind of comes from, but anyways, like this, I mean, I don't know if you can get this anymore, but you get the, you know, a DVD probably of this exact same rip of the source. I don't know what the source is, but anyways, when I eventually got this, like in the mid 2000s, it was very like fulfilling to see the the credits at the end, and then have it not go into Dumbo. So that was cool, and yeah, and I recently watched Dumbo with my daughter and my wife. It was my daughter's first time seeing Dumbo, and I think there were parts of it maybe the first time for me, because I just never watched like the very beginning, or the credits were cut off because it went into something else. I remember one of my other Disney Sunday night movies. I forgot the name. Oh, Donald Quacks Up, I think is what it's called, because there's that psychiatrist who's doing the wraparounds with all the Donald Duck and his nephew segments, and he's like spying on the family because he's writing a book about the psychiatry or how loony and you know crazy this family is, especially Donald Duck. But there's this really good episode segment of that film, Donald Quacks Up, where there's this really fancy yellow car that the boys are able to get. I think they called into a radio station and they won it or something, and they're like they're on fire, like feeling like, you know, hot shots in this flashy new yellow car. Donald is really upset about something, and they're at the gas station for a fill up, like, you know, like fill her up, and I think and Donald like ends up like completely sabotaging like their car. He I think like pours like gas or whatever into, you know, it was a convertible, so like into the seats, and he inflates the tires like enormous, so it looks like a monster truck, and then he puts it onto a riser that you'd find in an auto garage that lifts the cars up, and it like he pushes it all the way up so it's smushing against the ceiling. And then for me, right there, it always cuts into Hulk Hogan's Rockin' Wrestling and an introduction of Hulk with Mean Gene, and I hear that theme. Da da da, bum ba bum 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 bum, ba da 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 da, bum 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 bum. Like, it's just like, you know, Mean Gene here with Hulk Hogan. Like, it's immediately popping with that, and I don't even think I've ever seen the actual end of that Donald Quacks Up segment. And when I do, eventually, it's gonna feel weird. But yeah, those are some special memories with ABC Disney Sunday Night Movie, and the tapes that I recorded specifically. And yeah, and just like my memories of that, and how I have these unique experiences with these films that are sort of partially there and somewhat not there. And the missing pieces are some of the most interesting relics of my youth, I think. So that's that. We're going to keep rocking here, and we're going to go into the next segment shortly. We're now going to hear a little advertisement from one of our sponsors.
This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. This is drugs. This is your brain on drugs. This is drugs. Any questions?
So we all know this guy, Freddy Krueger. He is one of the best villains of all horror movies. He's classic, and for anyone who grew up in the 80s, this was the guy. as a kid, as a young kid, I was born in 1982. As a young kid in the 80s, there was this Freddy Krueger allure everywhere, and you couldn't ignore it. And it was, at least in my household, it was off limits for a long time. It was too much. It was too scary. It was too violent. It was too not what a little 4-year-old boy growing up in the 80s watching Thundercats and He-Man, Pee-wee's Playhouse, Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling, he needed to watch. Not yet. So, but that didn't stop me from asking to watch all the time. And, yeah, there was just never an opportunity to see a Nightmare on Elm Street movie or anything yet when I was very little. But there were some close runner-ups. And if it was a family film that involved something like a Freddy Krueger, that would work. And that's ultimately how I got into Mr. Boogedy, as I've already kind of talked about. But, you know, Freddy Krueger was definitely not safe for kids. I mean, his character in and of itself, not safe for kids. But also, you know, just, you know, I may not have fully understood, like, all of the themes and, you know, the violence is, it's pretend. You know, I need to, you know, and that's why a movie like Mr. Boogedy is very good, because it's talking a lot about setting up spooky things as the special effects department, and calling out that it's not real and it's production. And that's actually why I think the Michael Eisner intros for Mr. Boogedy, where he's, you know, in his desk and all of a sudden his pencil starts flying around, his coffee cup starts flying around, and, you know, the window's going up and down, and his desk is moving. Like, he's like, all right, very funny, guys. These are the guys in the special effects department, like, just playing a gag on me. I mean, it really, like, set you up. Like, we're going to introduce you to some horror elements, ghosts, a haunted house, a spooky ghost with a very, like, scary grilled cheese-like face that was kind of like Freddy Krueger. And there were these close-up shots of Mr. Boogedy, where he was like, hee hee hee. And I mean, I remember being, like, really scared to see those shots, because it was like, that was like the horror. That was the Freddy Krueger allure. You know, quick side note. I remember I eventually, I remember I always wanted, as I got older, even, like, you know, getting to be like a 10-year-old and, you know, pre-teenager, you know, I'm constantly putting posters on my wall growing up, 80s kid, and, you know, the things I like, games I like, you know, we all did this. And I always wanted to have a Freddy Krueger poster. And the thing was that, like, the thing holding me back from putting a Freddy Krueger poster on my wall was not so much my parents, like, oh no, I don't think you should be watching Nightmare on Elm Street. I mean, I was legitimately super scared. And for me, it was all about getting to the point where I was brave enough to have a Freddy Krueger poster on my wall. And I actually ended up with a poster of Freddy Krueger from A Nightmare on Elm Street, Part 4, where he's sitting at the Crave Inn, and he's, like, picking his teeth with his razors. And his eyes are, like demonic. Like, you can see, like, white around the edge of his eyes, like, from all directions. Like, it was like he was looking right at you, no matter what angle you looked at it from. And, you know, I'm very much, you know, thinking about, like, the painting in Ghostbusters 2 and the head coming out. Like, that was, like, I remember once that idea was in my mind, and I had a Freddy Krueger poster on my wall, and I'm deliberately trying to be, like, brave enough to be like, yeah, dude, I got Freddy Krueger poster on my wall. What's up? What posters you got on your wall? He-Man? Huh, that's kid stuff. Freddy Krueger. I mean, that is the Freddy Krueger alert. I mean, that was, like, I was trying to get to. And I remember being a little kid, seeing older kids, like, oh man, when I'm a little bit older, I'll be cool enough to, and be brave enough to have, like, a Freddy Krueger poster in my room. Like, that'll be dope. Like, that was what it was all about. And then I eventually did, and I remember times, like, being scared in my own room. I used to have to, like, it was near a door. I used to, like, have the door, like, cover the poster a little bit, and I was like, all right, I'm brave enough. I'm going to let my Freddy Krueger poster out. Oh, gosh. And then it was like, it was looking at me no matter what direction I was, you know, and that was a fun thing for me. I mean, and it started with Mr. Boogedy. Mr. Boogedy was the first time I had like that real close up shot of a real scary villain like that. But it was like safe because Michael Eisner let me know that it was the special effects department and it was a family film and it was ultimately about the family bonding together. And it has a really, really warm score with some, tense moments with the development of the Mr. Boogedy themes. But it's just like, it's got a great feel, Mr. Boogedy. I keep coming back to Mr. Boogedy. But let me get into Nightmare on Elm Street a little bit more here as well. All right. So Freddy Krueger, as I get older, I'm excited to see my first Freddy Krueger movie. I don't know if I got the poster before or after I actually saw the movie for the first time. That actually, I got a quick side story I got to say about this. So chances are I probably got the poster before I ever saw the movie. Like that, and that's how it was back in the day too. Like I wanted to have the street cred, like so bad I was even ready to throw it up like before actually having experienced like what it is. It was one thing to be like I got Freddy Krueger poster on my wall, but did I actually see the movie? I don't know. I probably didn't yet because I could buy the poster. I bought the poster at Walgreens. I remember that. They used to have posters like this at Walgreens, I was super excited to put that on my wall, even though it was terrifying. And I probably never even saw the movie yet, but I eventually did, and that's what I'm getting to. But this side story real quickly, okay? Completely unrelated, but the same spirit. So there's another movie, not in the horror genre, but in the sci-fi genre, in the bad sci-fi genre, and it's The Lawnmower Man, all right, from, I believe, 1992, and this is involving early 90s perceptions of what virtual reality is going to be like, right? And I remember when those trailers came out as a kid. I was in fifth grade, and it looked so incredible. Like this is going to be the best movie ever. I'm sure of it. I'm sure this is going to be the greatest film ever. And we had this thing in my fifth grade class, because we were the class of 2000. There's a lot of, like, I was going to be graduating high school in the year 2000. There's a lot of stuff that kind of, like, we did around that timeline and that awareness, when we get to the year 2000, things are going to be special and that sort of deal. So we had this thing that we did as a class where we decided to do a time capsule, and we wrote down a bunch of things on cards and included things in this time capsule that we would bury underneath a rock in front of our school, our elementary school, and then when we graduated from high school, we would go back and dig this up and, and see what's what. And I remember it had us do things like write down what our favorite movies were, what our favorite whatever was, like things we hope we will have accomplished by the time we read this in the year 2000. And I remember I was like, I'm definitely going to have a Ford pickup truck. Never got a Ford pickup truck, but that's what I really wanted as a fifth grader. I said something about wanting to play in a band, and that came true. But then when it came down to, like, well, what were my favorite movies at the time? I remember I wrote The Lawnmower Man. Because, and this is also, it's an R-rated movie, and still my parents gave me a hard time still about watching R-rated movies, like the fifth grade and stuff is, not all the time I was ever able to make that happen. And so it's just like, I'm like, as soon as I can see Lawnmower Man, I'm sure it's going to be the best movie ever, and that's going to be the movie I wish I had written on this little note card that was going to go in this time capsule I was going to look at all these years later. But I remember I didn't in fact see The Lawnmower Man yet, and and then I don't remember what my reaction to that particular piece was when we unearthed this time capsule in the year 2000. But when I did eventually watch Lawnmower Man again, like not that long ago, and just watch how terribly it's aged, it was like, what was I thinking, man? What was I thinking? But I know what I was thinking. I was thinking, like, I was this young boy on the dawn of becoming a teenager and wanting to, like, experience horror and, that whole world that was still kind of, like, forbidden to me, but yet is, like, there's temptations everywhere. Like, Freddy Krueger, like, I mean, it's not like I didn't see commercials on TV for, like, the Nightmare on Elm Street movies. And I remember when they were having like the Freddy's Nightmares shows that were on at midnight. Like I said, see little commercials for that, like at midnight, Freddy's Nightmares will terrify your dreams. Like I'm like, holy shit! Like I want to watch that. Yeah, but like I couldn't stay up till midnight, and my parents wouldn't let me tape it, but that was like, holy cow! Like what's going on at midnight? I mean, very very intriguing. I mean, it's the same experience going into mom and pop video stores in the '80s too. I mean, that's a whole separate topic of just the VHS artwork. I mean, you were drawn to so many films that like you were definitely not allowed to watch or rent, or maybe you were. I mean, just in my experience, I was definitely a little bit sheltered. I had to get it through, like a Disney Sunday night movie, and eventually kind of work the way up. But working the way up is what I'm trying to talk about. So I was eventually able to see A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 4. That was the first Elm Street movie I was able to do. And the way I was able to see it is because they eventually made a made-for-TV edited version of this that premiered. I think in the early 90s. I recorded this, and this was my first Elm Street movie. And yeah, it's similar to some of the ABC Sunday Night Movie stuff. I'm sure it's like slightly truncated at either the beginning or the end, or there was some commercials paused out of it. I probably didn't want commercials touching this because I really wanted my Elm Street movie finally. But I watched that edited version of A Nightmare on Elm Street 4 on my VHS tape that I recorded like over and over and over again. Like that was my Elm Street movie, and that was probably like I got the poster. I've seen number 4. Like I got some street cred now. Like Freddy Krueger, what's up? I'm brave enough. Yeah, I'm coming up in the 80s kid. Freddy Krueger, yeah, I can handle Freddy Krueger totally. So, but the funny thing is that, all right, so I mean, I have this edited version. So the interesting, of course, later, I eventually have the real version of Nightmare on Elm Street 4. I think what it was is, I think by the time I'm in, it'd be end of middle school, probably 8th grade-ish, 96, 97, getting into high school. I was getting my movies at Suncoast Video at the mall. And I remember they started releasing, like all the Elm Street movies, and they were like $9.99 each, but they were like in EP mode. I don't think most people even like knew really, unless you're a videophile back then. I'm just a kid. I just want my Elm Streets, for $10. Cool. This is like EP, SP mode, like whatever. Didn't bother me back then. I was happy to like have the whole set. I never had Freddy's Dead as a kid. I had to get that one later. I mean, I saw it a bunch of times. I've plenty of like memories watching Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. But yeah, at least having like the set of like Nightmare on Elm Street, like 1 through 5. And I'll never forget getting acquainted with A Nightmare on Elm Street 4 without all these edits from the TV version. And what I noticed was, the things that kind of stand out is that, all right, so there's that one girl who's really into like working out in Nightmare on Elm Street 4. And Freddy turns her into a bug, like turns her into a cockroach or whatever, and smushes her in the Roach Motel. You can check in, but you can't check out. Like there's that awesome sequence, right? But the thing is that like Freddy turned her into a bug because earlier in the film they established like she really doesn't like bugs because she's talking to that other girl who has the asthma issues, the mathlete or whatever. I forgot all their names. It doesn't matter. They're all like archetypes, classic slasher Nightmare on Elm Street movie. But anyways, there's this scene where they're talking in the parking lot, Deb, what's her name? I guess she's talking to the other, and quick, I need to see your math homework. Like what? Dynasty again? Yeah, like I didn't do my math homework because Dynasty was on it. It's like this little gag. And then right after that, there's these like douchebags in the parking lot, like hooting and hollering over and like, saying like, sexual, stuff that's just inappropriate. And I don't remember what the exchange was. But then right after that, she squishes this bug on the ground, like, ugh, I hate bugs, ugh! Like, and the thing is that for the edited for TV version, they cut that scene right after their exchange about, was it Dynasty again? And because it was language. I mean, they're dropping the F-bombs, and these guys are being jerks. And they just cut that. But they also lost that critical shot of her squishing the bug, because I don't think... I mean, I love that Freddy Krueger turned her into a bug in the way that death scene worked, but I never knew why. It didn't make any sense to me. But eventually it was like, oh, she's scared of bugs. But, that's one of those things. And then, there's other... Not everything else is like a plot game breaker or changer. Like, some of it was just like, scenes just like went a little bit longer. Or there was like, some of these shots were a little bit more exposed with different stuff. Like, when they're in the Craven later and he orders the pizza and all the sausages are like the faces of like the kids, and and then he like goes in and like stabs a meatball to eat it. Like, that was just like in the made for TV version, like it just like cut right before he actually stabbed like in their head, and there was like a reaction like, ah! And then he pulls it out, and oh, fresh souls. Like, eventually there's a shot of him just like eating it or whatever. It's like, because I remember there were more details that were not in the made for TV version right there. And same with that calendar girl who turns into Freddy and kills Joey when he's watching MTV on his waterbed. That whole scene, she leaves the poster on his wall and is all of a sudden in his waterbed, like, come on down, Joey. And of course, there's some nudity in the unedited version, and they cut out all the nudity in the made for TV version. But all these things are just like, part of the experience and in introduction to A Nightmare on Elm Street, into horror, into what was I not allowed to see as a kid, and what am I now allowed to see as a teenager, adult, like progressing, and how does that influence my overall experience with this stuff, which is awesome. I mean, I love Freddy Krueger, and I love the Nightmare on Elm Street films, and Nightmare on Elm Street 4 is just, it's super cool. I can't necessarily say it's like the best one of the series, but I mean, I don't know. I think it was a really good first one to watch, even if you want to be a purist and watch them in order. Sometimes you just like, you missed like the first 5 minutes of a movie, like when you recorded off TV in the early 90s or whatever, like, and that was just part of the experience, like, and then it's like, it's fulfilling to watch that film again later, unedited, and you're like, wow, there, like, that music cue kept going, or there was this whole other little thing I missed at the beginning that kind of pieced together. And sometimes there's like a critical plot point or something that, like, oh, she doesn't like bugs. So that's that in a nutshell. I believe that's everything. I mean, that's Freddy Krueger. That's how I got into it. That's the Freddy Krueger allure. That's the Mr. Boogedy influence. And yeah, and I guess we'll just like close this with one last little side story. So I eventually had my EP mode Nightmare on Elm Street tapes from Suncoast Video that I got for like $9.99 each. And I was really proud of having that stack of VHS in high school. And that used to sit on top of my TV in my bedroom. And I'll just say, I love my mom. My mom's great. But there was one time I was not so happy with her, because she was not so happy with me for some reason. And she couldn't get my attention. She couldn't get through to me. She had no choice but to go into my room. And she took my stack of Nightmare on Elm Street tapes, walked over the stairs, and threw them down the stairs. And was like, do I have your attention now? I was like, my Nightmare on Elm Street tapes. No, Mom, how could you? Oh my gosh, are they okay? Are they okay? They were okay. They were already in EP mode. It's like, I needed to replace them anyways. I didn't replace them until a lot later, like when I got into VHS collecting, and I was like, yeah, let's get nice versions of all of these. I mean, because I love the Nightmare on Elm Street series. I have number 4 right here. I didn't get a chance to pull this out yet, but it's like, I found this at Half Price Books for $1. I still haven't peeled the sticker off. I probably never will. I got it in a box protector because I love this film, and it's not the EP version. It's the media release. I mean, all those EP versions were put out by Video Treasures. Video Treasures. They're Video Treasures, but man, they'd be a lot more treasurable if they were in SP mode. That's for sure. But anyways, that's the release you want if you're collecting. And yeah, I appreciate the unedited version, and it's a fun movie. And if you haven't seen any Nightmare on Elm Street movies, try starting with number 4 and just see what happens. See where it leads you. Okay, I almost forgot one really, really important part of the whole Mr. Boogedy story. Okay, and that is, long after I'm through high school and I've been exposed to Freddy Krueger, I've been exposed to the whole Nightmare on Elm Street series, I have my own copies of the films, thanks to Suncoast's video. I still like to reference my Mr. Boogedy tape. I remember my second year at college, back in the days where me and my roommates, we used to just watch Simpsons on VHS all the time, just running Simpsons. This was all edited, no commercials, EP, 6 hours of Simpsons every tape. I had a roommate who was a very avid collector of Simpsons, and that's how we did our Simpsons. And I remember hanging out with a friend in my second year of college and was talking about Mr. Boogedy. I remember watching Mr. Boogedy with her, and it was like, oh, this is like this really cool throwback. And Mr. Boogedy was like still relevant later in life, in this world of college. But I was studying music for picture. I was studying film scoring, and I took some conducting classes because we had to conduct live musicians and synchronize the music to picture. That was what I was studying. And we got to work on some really cool stuff because the school had work prints from films that were real, and we were able to, do different cues. And there are all these really cool methods of synchronization, not necessarily using the computer. If you knew how much time or how many frames were going by, you were able to calculate how many bars of music and in what meter, what tempo you would want to write it at, and you could have it synchronized. Say there was going to be a kiss and you wanted to have everything synchronized with that. Well, you used to have a music editor put these things called punches and streamers onto the work print of the video, and it would basically give you this cue to like, all right, here comes your cue, boop, 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 there it is. So you would like be conducting and you'd be watching a television screen with a streamer about to come by, and then you want to get the downbeat, pop, 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 on the punches. And this was this whole like art form that I don't know. I mean, I've kind of like detached myself a little bit from the film scoring world. I don't know if people still do that old school punches and streamers thing. I mean, I think they do when it's live and you're synchronizing that way to picture like that. I mean, that's how like E.T. and all these old scores were done, and I learned that art. So, anyways, I got to take a conducting class, and I took a series of conducting classes to just learn the different techniques, and we did like classical stuff, and we had a room that had basically a U shape of different synthesizers, and this was to simulate an orchestra. So we had our basses over here, and our violins over here, and our woodwinds in the middle, and our brass section over here, and we would take turns playing a different part of the score and playing on that instrument on that keyboard, and then people would take turns conducting, and they would get a chance to interact. And if you made a mistake in your part, it's up to the conductor to call you out and like rehearse it with you, and you want to keep everyone engaged. So it was a really good practice. And we would also videotape ourselves in these classes, so we were able to critique our conducting performance and our ability to lead a group of musicians and go through a rehearsal, do a cue. Eventually, I took a class that was an advanced conducting class that was specifically about conducting for film and television. And the main body of work that we ended up working on in that class was Mr. Boogedy. I flipped out. Like the first day of class, the teacher was like, oh, there's always one in every class every year. Like apparently there's one diehard Mr. Boogedy fanatic in every class that rolls through. But for me, it was really special because I've watched this film so many times. And I have a lot of the music just ingrained in me because it's so much a big part of my experience seeing that as a young, impressionable child. I mean, there's a theme. It's chromatic. It's la da 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 da, and and there's a scene with Jennifer. She's always walking down this hallway, and it's like slowly creeping through the hallway. It's the middle of the night, and this door at the end of the hallway is illuminated with sort of a green glowing light you see in the cracks of the door, and you think it's Mr. Boogedy behind there, and you don't know. And she's going down there, and as she gets close to the door, there's these low cellos. They go dun da dun da 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 da. And it's cool because the first time it's like a fake out, and that the end of the cue just la da da just kind of fizzles away and nothing happens. And then there's another time you get closer, and then Jennifer, she faints. It's this kind of gimmick that happens, you know. She faints, and she goes, "No, I saw it. His face looked like grilled cheese." I love that because that's how I always refer to Freddy Krueger, Mr. Boogedy, just the guy with the grilled cheese face. You know, Jennifer and Mr. Boogedy said that after she faints. And I remember, yeah, they wake her up. There's no place like home. There's no place like home. And anyways, eventually they do it, and it's cool because the music cue, like, it keeps changing. Like actually that time, like, you hear Mr. Boogedy like, da da da, and it's like it's a much bigger cue. Anyways, that stuff has been, you know, with me my entire life. So it was just like amazing to be in this class conducting these music cues, watching the punches and streamers, and syncing the music with this sequence at the door, and like doing the fake out version, and then like doing the one where she like really faints. Like, it was really cool. And I remember like, oh wait, hold on, can I just hear flutes by themselves? Okay, flutes. And they did that major seventh thing. Dee da da dee da da dee da dee da da dee da da da. Like, okay, go. We rehearse that. Cool. All right, let's get the whole orchestra back together here. Ready? Here we go. And it's just, that was just so much fun. So much fun. And really, because it started with ABC, you know, Sunday night movie as a kid with my tape, watching that tape over and over again. It getting me into Freddy Krueger, getting me into Nightmare on Elm Street. The Freddy Allure finally takes its full form as I grow up, and I'm in college and I'm conducting music to Mr. Boogedy. It was really good, a real good evolution of my younger self, and just getting into the world of the macabre and the horror world. Music is a huge piece, and I love this style of scoring. This old school style. They don't do this type of horror, dramatic tension, also intertwined with all these like family themes, and it's like, you know, you're in like small town America, middle of New England. Like, there's a lot of music that just like kind of captures that essence too. So it's just a wonderful moment in time, cool film, and so great to see it from all these different perspectives over the years. So these are my stories. I got lots more rad stories I plan to share with you. Please subscribe to my channel. Please like and share this video. Leave a comment down in the comments section. I really appreciate the support. And yeah, I'll be coming out with some more videos soon. Please stick around. Stay rad. Peace.